In a continent built by conquerors, one tiny country chose not to fight, and somehow it won. No grand armies, no vast empire. Just strategy, patience, and the quiet genius of geography. This is the story of how Uruguay, the small land between giants, outsmarted them all. Seen from above, South America looks like a vast canvas of contrasts. Brazil stretches like a living continent with more than 215 million people. Argentina fills its plains with 46 million. And then, quietly tucked between them, Uruguay, just 3.4 million souls spread across endless green fields. The Uruguay population density is so low that you could cross the entire country without ever climbing a real mountain or finding a crowd. Its geography feels almost too open, as if nature forgot to give it walls. The land rolls smoothly into the Argentine pampas, fertile and generous, yet utterly defenseless. That openness gave birth to abundance, grass for cattle, rivers for trade, but also made it impossible to control who entered or left. Like a house without a fence, the beauty of Uruguay's geography became its own invitation to invasion. And that's the irony. The same land that promised wealth also carried a silent curse: vulnerability. In a world where borders defined survival, Uruguay was born without a shield. But maybe that weakness hid something else, something that time would later reveal. Because what happens when a country too small to fight back decides to survive another way? At first glance, Uruguay's geography seems like a gift. Two great rivers, the Parana and the Uruguay, meet the Atlantic, framing a land that should have been a gateway to prosperity. Yet those same waters that promised connection also brought danger. The open coastline and calm estuaries turned the nation into a stage for every foreign fleet that passed by. Montevideo, the jewel of the Rio de la Plata, became both blessing and curse. Its natural harbor was so perfect that empires couldn't resist it. Spain, Portugal, even Britain saw in it the key to controlling South America's trade. Locals would later call this paradox the perfect harbor curse. What made Montevideo valuable was exactly what made it vulnerable. While gold and silver drove conquests elsewhere, here it was geography itself that fueled conflict. Uruguay wasn't rich in minerals, but in position right between two giants forever watching each other. The land's misfortune was simple. It was too strategic to ignore, too small to defend. But how did a place defined by invasion become a nation defined by identity? Long before Uruguay became a nation, it was a pawn on a board drawn by empires. In 1680, the Portuguese planted their flag in Colania do Sacramento. Right across the river from Buenos Aires, 46 years later, Spain responded by founding Montevideo, not as a city of dreams, but as a counterattack. Each settlement was a move in a quiet, centuries-long chess match between crowns that never stopped watching each other. For 100 years, this strip of land wasn't a country, it was a frontier. Armies marched, flags changed, and maps were redrawn almost every decade. The history of Uruguay is less about founding fathers and more about survivors, charco warriors who vanished in battle. Gauchos who lived between borders that never stayed still. Families who never knew which flag they'd wake under the next morning. For generations, they said, nobody truly lived here, only those tough enough to never stop moving. It was a place where belonging meant endurance, not citizenship. But amid this chaos of shifting powers, something unexpected was forming. A culture that didn't belong to any empire, yet carried traces of them all. Could that be the seed of Uruguay's future independence? A nation born not from conquest, but from exhaustion. By the early 1800s, the empires were fading, but their shadows still fought. Brazil to the north, Argentina to the south, both saw the land between them as unfinished business. Out of that tension rose the Trinta y Tres Orientals, a small group of rebels who lit the spark of independence. But unlike the revolutions that drenched the continent in blood, this one ended not with cannons, but signatures. In 1828, under the watchful eyes of Britain, The Treaty of Montevideo was signed. Uruguay didn't win its freedom. It was designed into existence. A neutral strip between two powers, a peace buffer meant to stop the giants from colliding again. The South American buffer state was less a victory than a solution. And yet, it would become one of the continent's most stable nations. It's a curious thought, a country born not from victory, but from balance. Its destiny wasn't to dominate, but to exist peacefully, deliberately. And maybe that's why it endured when so many louder revolutions fell apart. But could a nation built on compromise truly thrive? Or was it doomed to remain just a space between rivals? Once independence settled, the land spoke louder than politics. Uruguay's geography shaped its economy, vast plains stretching for miles, perfect for cattle but not for cities. From the sky, it looks endless, a green ocean of grass where silence is the loudest sound. The land fed millions of cattle, people said, but never millions of people. The Uruguay population density remained low because its wealth was tied to emptiness. Large ranches, few workers, a system built on space, not community. The same openness that once invited empires now produced isolation. Life revolved around the rhythm of livestock, not the pulse of crowded streets. Even today, that legacy lingers in the calm of its small towns and the slow pace of its people. Yet there's a strange beauty in that quiet abundance. While other nations built skyscrapers and chaos, Uruguay found value in balance. A land that doesn't rush, that measures success not by noise, but by stability. Still, it raises a question. What happens to a country when its greatest strength is also its greatest emptiness? In the 19th century, ships filled with hope crossed the Atlantic. Millions of Italians, Germans, and Spaniards chased the promise of a new life in South America. But while Buenos Aires and São Paulo exploded with newcomers, Uruguay remained a quiet stop that most never took. The Uruguay population density barely changed, as if the migration wave simply flowed around it. Montevideo watched the transformation from a distance. Across the river, Buenos Aires became a megacity, its skyline growing like ambition itself. Meanwhile, Montevideo port stayed calm, efficient, and understated. The perfect harbor, no one overcrowded. It was like a small family store standing between two booming supermalls, surviving not by scale, but by identity. And yet, that absence of mass migration shaped Uruguay's culture in unexpected ways. Without the chaos of sudden urban growth, it preserved a slower rhythm, local, grounded, balanced. But that begs the question, could staying small in a century obsessed with expansion become the foundation for something larger, a hidden strength disguised as simplicity? For centuries, Uruguay's geography was its weakness. But over time, that same geography became its shield. With no mountains to hide armies and no gold to attract invaders, the country learned the rare art of peace. The Uruguay geography that once made it vulnerable slowly built a foundation of predictability, and in South America, predictability is power. While its neighbors faced coups, wars, and dictatorships, Uruguay chose another path. Small land, small population, but no chaos, they said. The history of Uruguay reads like a quiet anomaly: stable democracy, low corruption, and consistent progress. The South American buffer state, once designed to keep the peace, ended up perfecting it. It's almost poetic. The land that everyone once fought for became the one nobody needed to fight again. And in that calm, Uruguay discovered something the giants around it still struggle with: the strength of staying still. But how did this peaceful nation, once born of compromise, turn stability into its greatest form of power? Being small forced Uruguay to be smart. Without the population or resources of its neighbors, it turned inward, investing in mines instead of armies. Education became its quiet weapon. Democracy, its long-term strategy. While others flexed muscle, Uruguay built trust. In a continent known for turbulence, it chose predictability as progress. Over time, that mindset placed it alongside nations like Luxembourg, Iceland, and Costa Rica. Small nation success stories built not on dominance, but on consciousness. Uruguay legalized divorce when others still resisted it. It decriminalized abortion, embraced marriage equality, and expanded civil rights while many around it stumbled through political storms. Progress became its defense. That's the irony of its evolution. A country born as a buffer became a benchmark. While giants rose and fell, Uruguay stayed upright, quietly redefining what power means. But behind all that calm success lies a question still worth asking. Can balance truly survive forever between two restless powers? Living between Brazil and Argentina means living in constant contrast. Uruguayans learned to adapt, to blend, to borrow what worked and leave behind what didn't. Their culture became a quiet dialogue, a mix of Spanish warmth, Brazilian rhythm, and European restraint. Uruguay, between Brazil and Argentina, is not a borderland, it's a bridge. Walk through Montevideo and you'll feel it. The calm of the sea, the echo of tango, the aroma of mate drifting through open cafes. Montevideo history isn't one of conquest, but of coexistence. It's a city that looks outward, yet keeps its soul intact. A capital shaped more by conversation than confrontation. Uruguayans built an identity not from dominance, but from balance. They learned that being in between isn't a limitation, it's a skill, one that turns vulnerability into harmony. And maybe that's the true secret behind their stability. But if peace itself becomes a national trait, what happens when the world around them stops being peaceful? Uruguay never needed to roar to be heard. Surrounded by giants, it mastered the art of balance, turning neutrality into identity and smallness into strategy. In a world obsessed with power, it proved that wisdom can be a weapon. If understanding stories like this one makes you see the world differently, subscribe and turn on notifications because the next story might just change the way you see your own country.